What is up, everyone? So the last like 2 weeks I've been going honestly insane trying to find stuff to do because we've been waiting on a lot of pieces for a lot of the big project stuff right now. So we got the engine in the S15, we test fitted and everything. Now we're waiting on a couple big components before we could actually make any more moves on this project. And well, the E36, I didn't tell you guys yet, but we actually got the short block back from the machine shop. Full piston rods ready to go to get the thing back together, get the E36 back on the road, so we can then make the horse puppies that, well, we've all wanted it to, but unfortunately we had a big hiccup with this project, so the rest of the parts for the engine won't be here for a couple more days, but once that is all in, we can go hard, and we got a lot of stuff to do, and I honestly couldn't be more excited. But we were looking around trying to figure out what we can get done in the meantime, and what we all looked at Josh and said, dude, we have to get some work done near Corrado. All right, so Josh isn't here yet, so I'm gonna make Brian tell us about the car. So you guys have seen this in the background quite a bit. It's been here, I think, since I moved in.
It's a Volkswagen Corrado, and it's Josh's.
And it doesn't run.
And it's ran before,
kind of,
for like a minute or two.
All right, if you guys have been watching the channel for a long time, I feel like we've shown this car like once every 6 months for the last 2 years.
Yeah, we've talked about it a few times, but I mean, as a quick summary, this thing has been a journey for Josh. This is his second one that he's built. So it's been like a 10-year process for him.
Oh my God. Hold on, let's just talk about the setup really quick so they have an idea what we're talking about. So this is a 16 valve 1.8 bored over to a 2.0 with a fully built bottom end. It's got I think the same turbo is basically an Sonda on it, which when he bought it was up to date.
Yeah, it's like a 50 trim or something. It's actually an ABA bottom end, I think.
Well, no, it's just a 1.8 board, so it's basically an ABA at this point.
Oh, he should have used
an ABA. He should have just got an ABA.
And it would have had a crank sensor. Idiot.
Idiot.
Okay.
Okay, if you don't speak Volkswagen, I'm sorry, but the Volkswagen guys, I know you're loving this. Obviously, you can tell it looks beautiful. The big issue with this is Josh had it on I would say a pretty outdated ECU. He had some really crappy hardware on it. He bought a really crappy crank sensor kit, and the wire harness was made by someone else, and unfortunately, they didn't give it the attention it deserved. Over the years, it got worse and more hacked into, and this thing, management-wise, wiring-wise, was a living nightmare, and we tried to band-aid it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, I know. This thing has seen many pops and bangs.
You guys I know haven't seen the channel much. We have more hours in this car than probably three times as many hours in this car as we do in this car.
Yeah, and this car works awesome.
So, getting to the point here, what I'm talking about, this is a beautiful car. Josh has put his heart and soul into it, and it deserves a run. And well, we finally convinced Josh to just, well, put on a link. The only downfall is I gotta make him an engine harness now.
Yeah, so Jimmy has to take this spaghetti mess and turn it into something that connects this to that.
So we got him the Link Monsoon, which is like the best bang for the buck EC-wise for a 4-cylinder. For a turbo 4-cylinder, you literally cannot get a better deal than the Monsoon. And then, which is awesome since I now have to make up a whole new engine harness from scratch, which is fine. I'm happy to do it. Car deserves it. Link, I didn't even know this. RJ found out. Link has a 5-meter long loom.
Which is perfect for shaved bays, right?
Come with me. We already shoved this monstrosity. Oh, I think you put it away.
What?
Oh, the old engine harness. So he tore it apart last night, but check it out. This is, he took it all apart last night.
He took it all apart. There you go.
Here we go.
There you go. Oh!
Sorry, Brian.
My mirror, that's the only one I got on this whole car.
All right, check it out, So, this is Josh's old engine harness. So the old path was to come through the radio support, up and over the wheel arch, through the cabin, and right into the middle. So we have this 12-foot long harness. And, I mean, dude, look at this. We can't reuse this. So, we're starting from scratch, and we got a 5-meter long link harness. Our goal for today is to get a large portion of the harness done. Now it's already freaking late, but this should actually go pretty quick because it's a very simple setup. We don't have the connectors just yet. I made them buy all new connectors because they're cheap and well, it makes everything, well, a lot nicer.
So what are you gonna do with this tonight to be done for today?
Done for today? Well,
yeah. Oh my goodness.
If you just need wires, I suggest buying this loom just because the dollar per wire amount is actually a really good deal. But, so my goal today is to figure out the length for everything. We're gonna route it. We're gonna basically figure out all the wires we do need to get into the engine bay. We're gonna start pulling them off. We're gonna start laying some power wires in them and hopefully get it to the point where all we have to do is put some connectors on and put some loom on it, the next time you see us, and we'll be good to go. We got quite a bit of work ahead of us.
Oh, that was bad.
That was a really bad idea.
Yeah, you just made it bad.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can do it! I did it! Wow, it's been about 15 years.
Expensive jump rope. You guys know where to go. Hop below.
Chop Jimmy Ho.
Ready for it?
That's a long bitch.
Ready for this thing to run?
Yeah, I'm ready for this thing to run. Let's do it.
How long has it been, Josh?
Please don't. I don't want to count right now.
So we got it to run half-assed like once or twice.
Yeah, it ran like once or twice, maybe a couple months ago. But like,
No, like a
actually
couple years
driving, yeah, dude, years. We're maybe like 10.
Okay, well now we have the right hardware to make it happen. So we're making your harness tonight, so you gotta help me film this.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool.
We're filming.
Okay, take it. So, all right, boys. So I'm gonna try not to talk too much today, but we got a lot to talk about. I know you guys want to learn a couple things here and there. Maybe you guys don't. Who cares? Whatever. Welcome to the video. So, the quick start guide, right? I like starting with this thing. So, this gives you a set of all of your IOs, your inputs and outputs is what they call it. So you see from here they have the 12-volt grounds, analogs, ignition, auxiliaries, digital, all that nonsense right there, right? You see all that. So that's telling us what is in and out of the ECU. Then defined on our pin right here, which is all the colors in the harness. So basically your whole harness is just a plethora of powers, grounds, analog inputs, digital inputs, and auxiliary outputs, right? That sounds about right?
Yeah, let the motor know what it's doing.
So what you gotta do is you gotta figure out what is an auxiliary output, what's a digital input, and what's an analog input, right?
Yeah.
Analog inputs are basically 5-volt sensors, right? Anything that uses 5 volts, that's an analog. So you'll have your coolant temp sensor, you'll have your TPS sensor, basically any pressure sensor, anything that varies 5 volts to then give you a reading of something. Sound right?
Sounds right.
Okay. So we have our auxiliary outputs, which is something that works on 12 volt instead. So we have things like, in our case, control our boost controller, control our relay for our fuel pump, our engine fan. I'll even give us an output for our TAC. And did I say fuel pump?
No, you didn't say fuel pump yet.
And our fuel pump. Besides that, we have our ignition wires, and then we have our injector wires, which are already preset inside of, well, the harness right there. So I went through and labeled out where I want to put everything. So you can literally put wherever you want. So say right here I have analog volt 1 as the TPS and the analog volt 2 as the O2 sensor. You can switch those around. Doesn't matter because you're going to define it anyways. You just got to make sure you keep track of it so you know what to set up in your ECU, right? So, man, there was a lot of talking, but what I like to do first is there is a wire for every 34 pin, right? It's 34s. There is a wire for all 34 pins in here, and well, realistically, with Josh's setup, we're probably only going to utilize about 24 of them. So let's quickly remove all the wires we're not going to use and then go from there. So we thin it out a little bit by taking out what we don't need. Now, the last thing we could do is all the stuff that doesn't actually need to go to the harness, but actually needs to get to the inside of the engine, we can not pull that out, but we can actually trim it out of the harness itself. Something like, what do we want to have out of here? So the TAC output, right? So we're going to want a wire that goes from the ECU to his factory cluster, because I know Josh wants to run it. So we can actually cut that out and just leave a little bit for us to work with later on. This is where you want to start figuring out what you want to put into your factory connector, because usually there's one connector under the dash for a lot of the 90s and 80s cars that will have all the wires that go to your cluster. Sometimes your wire that will control your factory fuel pump relay that you could utilize, so be mindful of that. So for us, we're going to pull out the fuel pump wire, we're going to pull out the TAC, and well, that's about it. So 2 more wires out of the harness. Auxiliary output 4 and auxiliary output 2. So we go look over here, give ourselves a little bit to play with in the cabin. We don't need them. So now all these wires are basically going to be all our sensor wires for power source, switch source to the ECU. We're going to pull that out because we're going to have the chassis inside the cab switch on the ECU, which is our red wire. Okay, we can get rid of this for now. So these are all the wires that connect our ECU to our sensors. So we got all our extra sensor wires pulled out. All the stuff that needs to connect inside the cabin is right here. So before we start adding our power and grounds within the harness, we should go test fit it and figure out a better idea of our overall length. So Josh wants to continue to keep this all tucked and shaved, so we're gonna probably run in the same route that other harness.
It doesn't deserve to be called
I don't
a
think, yeah,
harness.
it doesn't even deserve to be called harness.
It doesn't get that.
Pile of electrical tape and wire. No disrespect, Josh. So if you have a factory ECU mounting location, you should probably use it. Josh doesn't, so he's gonna mount it wherever the hell he wants.
Love that.
How's it look? You like it right there?
Yeah, we'll let them decide.
All right. All right, so here's our mess that we're working with right here. This has to be probably one of the most difficult parts, depending on your engine layout, and that is kind of picking the lengths of everything. And so we roughly threw the wires where they need to go, right? So we have our injector signals, we have our coil signals, we have our cam sensor. Basically, the wires that we see for each sensor, we just kind of threw it at it. And now we have it hard fixed in place, and we're gonna kind of just like, honestly, we're gonna play a little bit of the guessing game here, and we're gonna kind of like run the wires. We're gonna kind of run the wires with our hands and just trim them where they should go. Luckily, like, there is some room for error here, right? We don't need it to be the most tight fit harness in the world, so we don't have to make it perfect. So basically everything we played with so far is just the sensor wires, like the wires that give signal to the ECU. Now what we have to run is our powers and our grounds. So now there's a 5-volt power, there's gonna be a 12-volt power, there's gonna be a sensor ground, and there's gonna be a chassis ground. Most of your sensors are gonna use a sensor ground, which is a ground that actually runs through the ECU before it actually grounds up to the chassis, and it's actually filtered for a cleaner signal. Obviously, we're gonna put a sensor ground on almost anything, everything here. The cam angle sensor, the coolant temp sensor, TPS, oil pressure sensor. Basically, honestly, I'm gonna put on everything because it's not gonna hurt. Only thing we really have to, and this setup since so simple, the only thing we do have to put a main ground on is the ECU itself. Ground one up here on the engine, and then we're gonna ground another one down there on the chassis, since this ECU does call for 2 ground wires on it. Right? You guys can't see anything, I don't want to show you that. So that's all the grounds, that's super easy. Now what we have to figure out is the powers. So the first thing is the 5-volt. Now the 5-volt is usually given by the ECU itself. It's the only power that's actually given off by the ECU. What needs a 5-volt power is your analog sensors, like we said before. So our analog is going to be our fuel pressure sensor, our oxygen sensor, our oil pressure sensor, basically all our varying signal sensors. Flex fuel's different, it uses 12 volts, that's a whole other thing we'll talk about, but commonly most people, I guess, don't have that. So luckily the Link harness actually already supplied the 5-volt signal and the sensor ground to a bunch of commonly used analog inputs. Things like our coolant temp sensor, our intake air temperature sensor, our TPS, our map sensor, which we aren't using, we're using the internal map, so we're actually gonna identify it as a fuel pressure sensor, because it is the same style sensor. We just reprogram in the ECU, right? That makes sense, right, Josh?
Makes sense.
All we're left with is our oil pressure sensor that we don't have the wires for, so we're actually gonna steal them from our, probably our TPS sensors, since it is a commonly sourced area. So we're gonna steal a 5-volt and a sensor ground, probably somewhere back farther in the harness, like down here, and then just splice it right back up, so our oil pressure sensor now has the 3 wires that it needs. Sensor, 5-volt, and a sensor ground. So this time, I'm trying uninsulated butt connectors instead of doing solder. Some people prefer solder, some people say it fatigues. Either way, they're both right, and I think this will do us well this time. So that with a little bit of heat shrink, and we are good to go. So we got 5-volt, and now let's run a sensor ground. And we'll just splice into the sensor ground for the fuel pressure sensor.
Nice and tight.
Guess who forgot the heat shrink?
I was just gonna
Yeah. It's alright, it's alright. We have our 5-volt, our sensor ground, and our signal now for the oil pressure sensor, so that is done. All the other 5 volts and sensor grounds are already ran through the link, and then all I have to do is throw a sensor ground on the cam angle sensor because we need it there also. So, what time is it, Josh? Because I know you've been listening. So now it's time to run the 12 volts. So, okay, since the ECU doesn't give off a 12 volt, we actually have to put a 12 volt in the harness. So, let's go get some red wire.
Maybe Jimmy's arm length.
Yeah, we're good. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run one thicker, I think it's about 12 gauge wire from where the ECU mounts inside the car all the way to the front. We'll bridge off from there. So we're gonna deal with the source of it later, but for now we're gonna make this 12 volt go to all the sensors that we need. So what I have on my handy dandy cheat sheet is we have the boost controller, we have the switch for the fan relay, we have all 4 coils, and we have all 4 injectors, and we also have the cam sensor. So we have to literally bridge this off to all of them. This might look like a thin wire to some of you guys, but this is plenty. It doesn't draw that many amps out of the whole system, so don't be too scared of it. So this will be the boost controller. This will be the fan relay. This will be the coil packs. This will be the cam sensor. And then the injectors. And we're good to go. Come on, Josh, your lighter kind of sucks. I've been using it too much, huh, buddy? Boom. Dude, I'm really liking these steel butt connector things as I'm spilling all of them on the ground. We now have this mess of wires right here. This is all our 12 volt, and now we got to disperse them to where they need to go. So this gets a 12 volt, this gets a 12 volt, and that gets a 12 volt. There we go. So as you can tell, I just like using zip ties to kind of hold everything together, or else like this stuff gets out of hand real quick. Boom. So I stepped the wire down to an 18 gauge to give 4 power sources for the injectors. So now when the ECU grounds the injector, it fires it and we're good to go there. So the only thing I didn't mention is on the coil packs. If you can see, we have 4 triggers and we have 1 power. We decided to run a sub harness for the coil pack, kind of like an SR20, right? You know that. Gardy, you have an SR20.
I know all about that.
Yeah. So I like having a sub harness on the coils, just in case you ever want to change coils, and honestly it looks nicer and whatever, so we're going to be doing that later on. But if you could tell, in this mess of wires, all the grounds are in, all the 5 volts are in, all the 12 volts are in. Now this side of the harness is done. It is ready to be taped up and get the connectors then on. Unfortunately, the connectors aren't in yet. They'll be showing up, I don't know, what are they? Hopefully tomorrow, of course. Hopefully. But we're good up top, and we're just gonna test the tape this. We're never gonna loom it, just because the style of the car, test the tape is more than good enough. And then for down there, we're gonna deal with the chassis interface in the next video for this stuff. So I'm gonna make Josh sit here and wrap this thing for the next 3 hours. This is it. This is how to wire up a whole harness in like 3.5 hours. So, it looks good. I like it. The Tesla tape's great, dude. And plus, like it being a Volkswagen, I feel like, you know, factory fresh, right? So, as you can see, we have kind of like just our taped flying leads here.
It's already covered.
Oh yeah, it's so. Oh my god, yeah, whatever. It's so dusty now. So, as you can see, we kind of just have our flying leads right here. So when we get the connector ends in, we'll pin each connector in, and then we'll kind of put it in the car. And with base shaves, I like leaving them pretty long and separate from each other, so you can really tuck the harnesses wherever you can. If it's not base shaved, you like after you put it in the car, you can always group it up and then tape the groups together. It works, but I don't know, Josh. What do you think? So far, so good, right?
So far, so good. Yeah.
So this is probably 45 minutes of me just rambling on. I hope you guys learned something from this. I know I was kind of all over the place because there was just a lot of information to share. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll answer it in the next video, but next time we'll get the ends on it, we'll get it plugged in, and then this thing should start up very shortly after that. On the link, dude, this thing should start just like that. So with that, I'm exhausted. I'm gonna end it. So Josh, congratulations, buddy. This thing's gonna run soon. And well, all the homies' cars got to run around here, so you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe. If you want any link products, shop below. Hop below, shop Jimmy O. It's been a long day. Brian.
Good night. We love you. Bye. Like, comment, subscribe.